Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this session around minimum energy efficiency standards in the private sector and what we can actually learn from social housing. So my name is Luke Loveridge. I've worked in local authorities and with social housing landlords for quite a few years now, probably about over a decade. I then sort of transitioned into essentially tech, and I sold a previous company to a big fire alarm manufacturer, which has a big presence in social housing. And now I've joined Eco Approach, particularly on the tech side of things, and in how we engage lenders and brokers and estate agents in helping them to retrofit with their customers. I'm also, if that wasn't enough, I'm now joined by Jamie Crane. He also has a wealth of knowledge and experience in social housing and in retrofit. So Jamie, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Luke, and good morning, everybody. So my background is, as Luke has suggested, for the last 10 years plus, been working with social housing providers, local authorities to understand their stock and how best to retrofit some of those stock to get it to a standard that it needs to be as of today. So looking forward to sharing that experience and hopefully helps you with the private sector properties.
Thanks, Jamie. So just in terms of today's format, it's a brief session, sort of half an hour to 45 minutes. I'll just quickly run through over sort of like the key context and issues, why what we can actually learn from social housing. Jamie will then go down into a deep dive sort of case study, and then we'll have a Q&A. There is a Q&A chat, so if you do have any questions, do pop them on. There will be a recording afterwards, and any follow-up materials will be sent afterwards as well. So no need to take notes. So if I get going on sort of the first sort of intro piece. So firstly, what has actually been confirmed around minimum energy efficiency standards? So the Warm Homes Plan set out in January this year that the deadline will be the 1st of October 2030. That will come around sooner than you think. They actually set out a dual metric to measure compliance, so a EPC around fabric first, and then either meeting a smart readiness metric, so that could be solar panels or battery storage, or the heating system, so how carbon intensive is the heating system. Crucially, there is a grandfathering rule, so the actual current EPC regimen will still be valid until October 2029, and actually the new dual metric standard, which will be part of the home energy model, that's not going to be out until very late 2027 next year. So actually the current regimen is actually the main thing at the moment, and that is acceptable for compliance. It has been confirmed that the cap per property will be £10,000. And actually there's also a low value exemption, so if the value of the property is below 100,000, it's 10% of the property. So if it's 90,000, it'll be £9,000 cap. And there's also exemptions for solid wall insulation as well. So there's actually a fair bit of flexibility on this at the moment. So currently, what's the urgency? Why are we sort of coming out with this right after the Renters' Rights Act has sort of been enacted? It is the next big thing, but we're currently not doing enough. So if we, as a straight line linear, wanted to get to that target by 2030, we'll have to do over 2,200 properties per day. We're currently doing under 500, so we really need to gear up on this. And this is at a time when actually the number of qualified electricians, which will probably do quite a bit of this work, is actually decreasing. So it's gone from 240,000 qualified electricians in 2018 down to 158,000 in 2024. And the projection is that will go down even further by the deadline. So quite significant supply chain issues that could come up there. And demand will outstrip supply. So we've actually been quite involved in other compliance sort of activities as well. So previous minimum energy efficiency standards, and also electrical safety testing, EICRs. And so we run a lot of our data through a model, and this is what we came up with me. So sort of a steadily increasing retrofit compliance take up in the first couple of years, That first big spike is just after the election, so we think a lot of landlords might be just sort of building up to see what will happen during the election, and then suddenly a lot of people will then start to retrofit, and then a huge increase sort of 18 months out, with the last month or two being significantly increased demand there, which probably no supplier would be able to meet actually. So there is a key challenge about how we educate landlords to shift that peak further on and sort of even that out along the sort of number of years. So this session's on social housing. So why are we, what are learning from social housing? The first thing is actually a lot of the standards are starting to align with social housing. So the Decent Home Standard, for example, and a big part of that is around whole home thermal comfort and also damp and mold. So that is quite a big overlap with energy efficiency. So there will now be that single quality floor, so that Decent Home Standard. AWAB's law, which is around damp and mold, is being extended into the private rented sector. For the Decent Home Standard, there's that unified deadline of 2035 to get your sort of subpar stock up to standard. They're extending governance into the the private rented sector, so there will be an independent ombudsman and a mandatory national database. And there's new powers for local authorities to actually pursue quite aggressive enforcement on the Decent Home Standard, up to £7,000 fine, for example. So those standards are starting to align with social housing. So it's really important to see what they've already been doing around this for the private rented sector. And there's also been huge progress around energy standards in the social housing sector as well. So over a decade ago, around 45% of social housing was about C, but around 25% of private rented sector was around a C. Now, both have had significant improvements over the last decade or so, but there's just been more improvement in the social housing sector. So up to like 76% now, we're seeing as C within that sector, whereas only about 51% in the private rented sector. So there's still a lot of way to go with the private rented sector. But there's also been quite a lot of failures as well. So I think it is quite useful to see what those failures are, but also where they've gone right as well. So what can we take as from the private to the private rented sector that can be applied. So that's just a very quick sort of warm up, just sort of scene setting, the context, and the why social housing. I'll now hand over to Jamie. He will just go through the sort of case studies that we've been experienced in more detail. Jamie, just let me know when you want to go on to the next slide.
No, thank you. Okay, so yeah, thanks, Luke. So I guess I'm going to talk through one of our case studies that we've been working with one of our clients, Southern Housing, for a couple of years. But there has been so much work done in the social housing sector to rectify their stock, and some of the lessons that we can learn, I'll talk through. But certainly a big driver within social housing has been to achieve an EPC rating of C by 2030, and they've all been working towards that target. Some have certainly done better than others along that journey, but they've had support along the way with some of the funding streams that have been available to them. But it's not all about funding. A lot of them have invested from their own pockets to invest into their housing stock to get them to where they need to be. But they've certainly done some great work, but there's certainly lots more work that needs to be done to achieve that target of having all properties at C by 2030. Next slide, please. So one of our key clients is through Southern Housing, that we've been supporting them on a journey for a number of years to ultimately upgrade their housing stock to BC. They're one of the largest housing associations of Southern Housing, widespread stock, but they have, from their 80,000 stock, 30% of those properties are still at a C and below. So clearly lots of great work has been done, but lots still needs to be done to improve those properties to get them where they need to be. Specific projects, all projects are different and different drivers for different clients. But Southern Housing is specifically focused on delivering solar PV, heat pumps into those properties, insulation, which is key, as I'll talk about as we go through some more learnings, and ventilating the property to the right standard so it can breathe, with avoiding things such as damp and mold, which has been a real driver in social housing moving forward. So, as far as social housing is concerned overall, I've already alluded to some of the funding that supports retrofit in social housing is being driven by energy company money or government funded money just to support those good projects. But regardless of that, to be able to identify and build a project, and a successful project when you're working towards timescale is about having good data and good preparation for the project. Housing associations don't always understand the housing stock as well as they should do. Some know them better than others, but really trying to understand and analyse their housing stock through the EPCs that have been done in the past. Eco Approach can certainly support and understand housing stock and produce a roadmap of what properties we suspect would qualify for a project that is D-rated currently, maybe E, F and G, and what it needs to get it to a C-rated. We can recommend a number of different measures, but essentially having a roadmap as to which properties we believe we can get to a C at a cost-effective way, providing that roadmap. The roadmap will take you so far. Hypothetically, with the Southern Housing, when the latest project we're on is for 100 properties. Prior to that, there was additional properties that was identified, and it's about doing things from a desktop will take you so far, but we want to be able to eliminate quite quickly properties that we don't qualify, because an EPC will tell you so much. So by doing some light touch technical surveys, we can identify properties that we know will qualify for funding that we may apply for, which will essentially make the project a success when it does mobilise and become live as we actually get to site. Past 2035 and through grants is about identifying, applying for the money essentially through the government's. PAS 2035 is all about a standard. I'll go into more details about that, but it's looking at a whole house approach as opposed to an individual measure approach, which has been all important in social landlords and can certainly be applied into the private sector on more of a light touch. And the objective is obviously about getting the properties to where they need to be, but ultimately making those properties more comfortable for the people that live in them. Different drivers, different objectives. Yes, the objective is to achieve C within social housing, but there's a number of ways to actually get there. Some clients may have identified a project that may require more deep retrofit to suit their needs. They may have properties that currently sit at E, F and G that require insulation through external wall insulation, internal wall insulation, perhaps a new heating system, a low carbon heating system in there, being an air source heat pump, installing PV on there, which is obviously quite expensive to be able to do those things, but it's about building that project, doing the light touch tech surveys, and essentially delivering on that project when the contractor has been appointed. Ventilation will always be key and is one of the main requirements for PAS to ensure that building breathes correctly from there. Getting to see for some of the other clients that we work with is about looking for the most cost-effective way to do it. So they may have clients in this bid that stock that is just slightly short of the SAP score of where it needs to be, and that might be about installing more cost-effective measures, be through loft top-ups, being through upgrading the cavity wall insulation that's in there, the heating controls, etc., and make the money spread from the funding that they have to achieve it on more of a wide, larger scale as opposed to through deep retrofit. Key to engaging with all successful projects is really about engaging residents, and not just engaging them, getting their buy-in to support the works that's going to be done in those properties. That really means supporting them through engagement events, writing to the residents to inform them the work that's going to be taking place, what work is going to be taking place for those properties, and really trying to keep them updated at every possible stage throughout the process to be able to ensure that that project is successful, they're engaged, they allow for the works to be completed in their homes, because just because it is a social housing property doesn't mean to say that the work has to be done. The resident has to be engaged to ensure that that work is completed and completed with their support and compliance to ensure it works correctly. We always will need to have some contingency stock, because there will be dropout, and there has been dropout in social housing for many years. We may come across properties that just aren't suitable when you go out to do the initial surveys with on properties. A resident may have a change in circumstances, so having additional stock available to support that project is important to ensure that the right number of properties is treated, so that the funding has been secured and has been achieved and the project is successful. Using a quality contractor is it really is important as far as all retrofits is concerned, whether that be in the private sector or whether that be in social housing sector. There has been work that's been done in years gone by that has not been to standard. Delivering things to PAS has certainly supported and improved that, made an awful lot of improvements in the industry as we've developed the PAS standard over the past 5 years and beyond. But installing the right contract, having the right contract to do the works for you will minimise callbacks, so repeat visits, and make sure it's installed correctly will ensure that it performs at its peak, and the resident is ultimately benefiting from the energy efficiency measures or the low carbon heating that is installed. It's installed to the right standard, it performs correctly, and it doesn't cause the property any problems once the contractor has completed the work and handed over to the resident. Aftercare is so important, it really is. Installing the works to that standard, making sure the tenants, the residents know how to use it. And if there is a problem, once the property has had the energy efficiency measures installed, then it's about occasionally, if we have got to go back to support a resident as to how to use it, or if there is a problem with the controls from there, or whatever it might be, it's about listening to the residents and ensuring that we return to make sure that it's put right should there be a problem that's results once the contractor has left. I've talked a little bit about Southern Housing and the good work that we're doing with Southern Housing, but there are so many clients that we do work with within Eco Approach, which we're proud of, and we have a number of case studies that are on our website that please take a look if you get a chance. There's also case studies on our YouTube channel, which will bring those case studies to life as well.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Jamie. We're now going to go on to the Q&A. We do have a couple of questions here. So the first one is, so how can private landlords apply past 2030 quality principles without the high administrative overhead? Because that is usually quite, in depth, isn't it, Jamie, the past 2035? So how could that more flexibly be applied to the private rented sector?
No, it is a really good question, and PAS is about a whole house approach, but there is a lot of compliance that is required as far as PAS 2035 to deliver it to the letter of the law from compliance. And what I mean by that, you have to do a retro assessment on a property to assess that whole house approach and what is required to achieve it to a certain standard. It's about ensuring that the design is done, a retro design on the property, and sitting behind all of the retro assessment and the retro design is something called a retro coordination, which is essentially someone that's marking all of those things to ensure that everything is recommended in the right order, it's designed correctly, and it is delivered to the right standard. But that compliance does come at a cost, which is required as far as the funding market is concerned, which is often a big driver, as I've suggested, in the social housing market. As far as private properties is concerned, the same principles can still apply. PAS, a big element of PAS is about ventilating properties properly. What recommendations a retro assessment may identify can be identified by other means as well. But taking a fabric first approach is important, but you don't need to necessarily go to the cost of a retro assessment to be able to do that. You can identify that from other means. Likewise, the design, the coordination. You can follow the same principles of PAS without having those compliance requirements that are in place if it is being paid for from someone's capital funds to be able to do so. So understanding what the requirements are of PAS, understanding your properties, what needs to be, and applying those same principles will allow you to install the property from a fabric first approach, purpose first of all, and ventilating the property through mechanical ventilation, through door undercuts, trickle vents on your windows is all good practice which PAS adheres to, but you don't necessarily need to go to the compliance cost to ensure that it's robust as far as that is concerned.
I think that's really important because a retrofit assessment could cost for 350, 400, 500 pounds. Landlords aren't going to be, private landlords probably aren't going to be willing to sort of spend that up front, are they? So particularly if funding's not available for it. So I think that is
it is most definitely the case. And one thing to add, not all of the social landlords that we work with they deliver to something which is referred to as sensible PAS in the industry, which is it's about delivering to the right standard, the same standard, but if they're paying for it for their own capital, it doesn't necessarily need to have the expense of the retro assessment and the process that follows.
So I think we mentioned some improvements, but what would you say is the top three sort of light touch improvements that could be good for the landlord to get to that C journey? So I suppose just to add to this before taking over, Jamie, when we've done some portfolio analysis before, we've seen that 50% of some portfolios could get to a C within £1,500 per property. A third of them might just need one or two light touch measures. So over to you, Jamie.
Yeah, no, and it's a really good shout, and there are properties that are there and thereabouts. Maybe a D-rated property that needs that small push to get it to a C to comply, and things such in those situations. Looking at the insulation within the property is always key, and the first recommendation, whether that be through the loft top up that may be required, that will allow you to get your score a little bit further and improve the comfort. Does the property have cavity wall insulation that's installed there right now? Has the property got the right heating controls? Perhaps could install in smart heating controls. Help support that journey towards C. So loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, heating controls, smart thermostats are always important. Put controls in there for the residents to be able to control the temperature of the room at a cost-effective way. So all cost-effective energy efficiency measures which is often adopted in the social housing market as well, industry as well, but very important as far as private properties, and certainly something to look at first.
I think this is really important because a lot of the big players out there in retrofit just want to sell solar panels, heat pumps, battery storage, EV chargers, basically. But actually, a big proportion might just need a mix of some light touch works. They might need that light touch works plus maybe solar panels as well. So it doesn't need to be just pumping solar panels, but they will play a part. But there are these other quick wins as well.
Absolutely.
And then, yes, just in terms of sort of due diligence, really, because I think previously there's been a phenomenon of like phoenixing where, a small company is just closed essentially, and then all the guarantees that go with that company just are gone as well. So what sort of due diligence should, be performed on delivery partners? What sort of the key criteria?
I think one of the most important things for when you're selecting a contractor is to check that they are Trustmark endorsed. Trustmark being obviously sets the standard in the industry. Contractors have got to go through a process to ensure that they meet the right standard, they do things in the right way to deliver works, so that ultimately you can take some confidence that the work that's being completed in your property is being done to the right standard. As far as insulation is concerned, yes, there has been some problematic installs in the social housing and in the private sector as far as installing works is concerned, and having an insurance-backed guarantee on the back of the work that is completed. And we particularly work with the IEA as our insurance backer, and they go the extra mile as far as things, for example, when installing cavity wall insulation, we need to ensure it's installed to the right standard. And before we do any kind of installs, we have to do the technical assessment on the property. We have to demonstrate to the IEA that the cavity is fit and fit to be installed with cavity wall insulation. They actually approve it before we install, and they go the extra mile to the IEA to be able to do that. So ultimately, they know that property is suitable for cavity wall and it's been installed to the right standard. But it definitely is a case of, if you're choosing the right contractor with this Trustmark registered, because if it doesn't, then it can cause problems which may be through damp, mold, whatever it might be. But very important.
Yeah, and I think just to sort of build on that, we've been quite successful amongst sort of lenders, social housing, etc., because we are big enough to sign essentially the insurance-backed guarantees ourselves. There's a lot of suppliers out there which will pass on to a subcontractor, and it's the subcontractor which signs the insurance-backed guarantees. And that could just be Dave down the road, who might be great, but if they fold, that guarantee is not really worth much. So I think just, understanding who signs that insurance-backed guarantee, I think, is quite critical. Next question. So I think this one for me, just like, how should lenders adjust their risk models for properties currently sitting below a C? So I think this is sort of already happening and will happen. So I think a really good example would be Nationwide, like TMW, the mortgage, the buy-to-let side of Nationwide. So, previous minimum energy efficiency standards the standard was E. So any F and Gs needed to be retrofitted. The mortgage works don't currently lend on anything below an E now. So you can probably just see how that will go with these new minimum energy efficiency standards. They probably won't accept any new jobs, any new sort of securities on anything below a C in future. I can sort of see that going. And then not in the buy-to-let space, but Halifax, I have seen just in the sort of residential space, they are basically able to lend more on sort of A and Bs, but then less on the sort of E's, F's and G's. So I think this is happening already. Affordability will change. Some properties they won't lend on some properties, and I think that will just increase as we get near the deadline. I think this is probably one of the last questions, but what is the single biggest factor in ensuring a smooth install when the property is still occupied by a tenant? And I think, Jimmy, if you can answer that, but I think from my perspective, at Eco Approach, we have been focusing on what's the most cost-effective solution for landlords, but also the least disruptive. So, having internal wall insulation, having to decant tenants is quite a headache. So, what is that optimal solution? So, Jamie, if you could take that one.
Yeah, no, certainly. So I think probably as far as retrofit can be disruptive if it's more deep retrofit, and engaging with the resident is probably the single biggest box to tick. Getting there, buying, knowing when you are going to be arriving to complete the work, making sure that rooms are prepared. So if you are installing internal wall insulation, for example, that we do a room at a time, transfer the belongings so that they're not damaged and they're covered, etc. But engaging with the residents really is key to, and probably the biggest factor to make it work, run smooth with the install with things. Because if they have surprises, then it halts work, and ultimately can disrupt things from there. So I'd suggest probably the biggest factor is definitely engaging, communicating, making sure that they're aware of all the different stages, the work that's going to be completed to make it run as smoothly as we possibly can.
It sounds simple, Jamie, doesn't it? But a lot of companies don't do that.
No,
just crack on with it and don't provide that clear communication.
Absolutely does. It really does. But engaging with the residents, and it really is key to make sure the project works successfully.
Excellent. And that's it. So I don't think there are any other questions being put forward. So yeah, the recording will go afterwards and with the slides, and we will also be posting throughout the month on this as well. So thanks for your time. And yeah, I hope you have a good rest of the week and weekend. Brilliant. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Luke.